Hello everybody, welcome back to Jerusalem, to Zion. Fantastic to be learning with you again. This week we're learning the Torah portion as we always do. This week's Torah portion is called Chayei Sarah, or in essence, the lifetime of Sarah. Who was Sarah? Sarah, the wife of Abraham, our patriarch. So it's very interesting this week. We see Sarah pass away. And I do want to dedicate this small time together that we're learning together to a man, a rabbi, who passed away over this past weekend on the Sabbath. His name, Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Arguably one of the greatest orators in the Jewish world today, one of the greatest writers, one of the greatest philosophers, was the chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth, including the country from where I came originally, New Zealand. A man held in high esteem by many, many millions of Jews and non-Jewish people around the world. Did wonderful work and has left us with generations of Torah that we can learn from him. It's amazing the impact he's had. So today I took some time to study some of his work about this week's Torah portion, and I'm sharing it with you in his memory, and may his soul be at rest and rise, and may he always be a blessing. May his memory always be a blessing to us. So, Rabbi Sacks speaks this week about the importance of land and the importance of children. These two things, the land being Israel, and children, our future, what we call Jewish continuity, the continuity of our communities and of our families, these were two things central to the outlook that Rabbi Sacks had on the modern world. And within this parasha, he points out that those two things are very central. We see in the portion this week that Abraham is looking for a place to bury Sarah, his wife. And he comes down to a place called Kiryat Arba, or Hebron, which is actually the second holiest place these days to Jewish people. And here's what happens there. It appears at first that they're going to sell him the field that he wants in order to bury his dead. They're going to give it to him for free. There's a bit of negotiation going on here with Ephron, who's a local resident. What happens here, if you turn to chapter 23 of Genesis, at verse 11, here's what Ephron says to Abraham. "No, my lord, heed me." In other words, you're not going to pay for this. I have given you the field, and as for the cave that is in it, I have given it to you. In the view of all the children around here, all my people, I have given it to you. Bury your dead. Great. Well, that wasn't very hard, was it? Until we go 3 verses later. And then Ephron replied to Abraham, saying to him, verse 15, "My lord, heed me. Land worth 400 silver shekels? What's that between you and me?" The terms have changed. There's a tough negotiation going on here. Abraham doesn't lose sight for a moment. He has his goal on a specific cave, in a specific field, in a specific place, and he will pay good money to bury his dead. The honor that he gives his dead is tremendous. And a wonderful message for us. At verse 17, again we're in Genesis chapter 23, at line 17, the contract is confirmed, and the Torah takes the time, the Bible takes the time to make it a legal contract and to spell out to us exactly how much is paid, exactly where this burial place will be, and that place has been purchased to Abraham. We know today there's all different kinds of battles over the land of Israel, and disputes over whose land is it. Here the Bible points out very, very clearly that it was purchased by Abraham. It says at line 17, "And Ephron's field which was in Machpelah," and where our forefathers, our matriarchs and patriarchs are buried today, is that cave of Machpelah, facing Mamre, the field and the cave within it, and all the trees in the field, being very specific here, very legal, within all its surrounding boundaries. It was confirmed as Abraham's as a purchase in the view of the children of Heth, there were witnesses among all who came to the gate of the city. It's remarkable. A real purchase, because land is important. Because Abraham placing himself legally under contract with the purchase using 400 silver shekels, this was incredibly important to Abraham, incredibly important to the future of the Jewish people. God had promised Abraham, if you look back in the last few weeks of Torah portions, God had promised Abraham many times already that the land shall be his. But more than that, it shall be ours in future generations. But then there's something else. There's something else over the first 4 or 5 Torah portions that we've read since the beginning of the Torah in the book of Genesis, where God has promised Abraham children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and that his people and the nation, and he will be the father of many nations, not just one, but the nation that will be inherited through Isaac, and where the covenant will stand for generations and for eternity, they will be like the stars in the heaven, and they will be like the sand, the granules of sand. Many, many people. But yet when Abraham is burying his wife, and when he himself is elderly, he has at this point just Isaac to carry on that covenant. He has Ishmael, who will be himself the beginning of another nation, but in Isaac he has just one. And so his next target, after fulfilling the first and finding that burial place in Hebron, is to find a wife, a good wife, a partner who will be with Isaac, the one who brings the next generations into this world. And he goes to family to find that wife, and finds Rebekah. He sends his servant Eliezer. Eliezer prays. Eliezer hopes. Eliezer does all the effort required. And we see in chapter 24 of Genesis, in this week's Torah portion, that Rebekah is willing to go with Isaac and be Isaac's wife to be and begin those next generations. But just like in Hebron, where there was tough negotiations and flip-flopping, as the price was discussed, we see it again here. If you open again chapter 24, line 55, Lavan, Rebekah's brother, says something remarkable. They've basically agreed. They've come to an agreement. But what happens is this. Verse 55, her brother and mother say, "Let the maiden remain with us a year or 10 months. Then she will go." Eliezer, like Abraham, Eliezer, Abraham's servant, does not take his eye off the ball for a second, though it be tough, though the negotiations be difficult. Everything's riding on it. What is his response? "Do not delay me now, that God had made my journey successful. Send me and I will go to my master. Let us call the maiden and ask her decision." And in fact, Rebekah's decision, Rivka as we call her in Hebrew, her decision is to go. And there begins the realization of God's other promise to Abraham. You will have a land. The land shall be yours. And you will have a family and generations to come after you, and a great nation through the covenant, through Isaac and Rebekah. What's remarkable to me is, in fact, Rabbi Sachs, you can read in his Covenant and Conversation book for this week, he tells a story of struggle. He tells that story that the things which are important to us and were promised to Abraham, land, Israel, children, which means continuity, these things do not come without effort. These things do not come to us without struggle. And Rabbi Sachs points out so brilliantly, like he does always, that these two things, our children and Israel, the state of Israel, the land of Israel, remain such central foci for the Jewish people today, and not just Jewish people, but many of you listening today who care desperately about the people of Israel, about Aliyah, about people coming home to Israel, about the security of Israel, and about the continuity and next generations in this land. Rabbi Sachs was a believer in these two things, in the state of Israel, in the land, and in the children to come. And he invested deeply in those. And all of us who give of our own means and our own time through philanthropy and tzedakah, through charity, and the giving of our own energies towards those two things, we should always have the merit to believe that God will fulfill those promises as he did to Abraham, and will continue to fulfill them today for us. I want to end today by quoting just the last two sentences from Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, who we lost this weekend so sadly and so prematurely. He says like this: faith does not mean passivity. It doesn't mean be passive. Having faith doesn't mean then you can be passive. It means, he says, the courage to act and never to be deterred. The future will happen, but it is we, inspired, empowered, given strength by the promise, it is us who must bring it about. And that's the key. We can have faith in God, and we should have faith in God. But our actions today, like yesterday, make those things happen. And we learn that from Abraham and from his servant from this week's Torah portion that Rabbi Sacks shared with us. Be determined in our way, keep faith in God on our way, and bring about the good things that should be. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. I wish you greetings, warm greetings from Jerusalem, and all the very best. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.